Hello, hello. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the August edition of the WinUI Community Call. My name is Gabby, and I'll be your host MC for this morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are. A little bit about the WinUI Community Call. It takes place on the third Wednesday of every month at 1600 UTC, which is 9 a.m. Pacific. Our next call is planned to be September 14th. If you're new, reach out to us on GitHub at Microsoft UI XAML, or Microsoft Windows App SDK. As always, there's also our Twitter at Windows UI, so where you'll get all the latest updates about Windows UI, Windows App SDK, when these calls are, or new releases. So a bit of an overview of WinUI for those who are new. Feel free to pause here on the recording. This call is recorded, so you can come back later, check it out. So this is a bit about WinUI 3, WinUI 2, and Windows App SDK. But today we have a pretty jam-packed call with a lot of feature demos from folks across the team, across different releases. So we'll be spotlighting App Lifecycle, which was introduced in Windows App SDK from Win32 apps. We'll also be giving an overview, kind of a refresher on WebView 2 now that we've added it to WinUI 2 for UWP apps. We'll also be covering content. So we added a new namespace in the 1.2 experimental release for Windows App SDK, and we want to give a bit of info about what that is. And then, as always, we'll end with kind of general Win App SDK, WinUI news, recent releases, upcoming releases, which will also include our targeted features for Windows App SDK 1.2. And then we'll end it with Q&A that we've taken both from our GitHub issue, and then if you're asking any live, we'll be sure to cover that there. Awesome. So first up, we have Darren. Hello, Darren. How are you this morning?
I'm doing pretty well, Gabby. How are you?
I'm good. So you're here to talk about App Lifecycle. Would you like to introduce yourself and give a bit of an intro?
I would love to introduce myself. What is up, everybody? My name is Darren Hona. I hope everyone has a fantastic day, or will have a fantastic day, since I know not everyone here is probably going to watch from America. My name is Darren Hona, as I guess I said the first time. I'm the software developer on App Lifecycle that was introduced in Windows App SDK, and this happens just App Lifecycle is just APIs to help handle the life of your app. I have some Twitter handlers. I have a Twitter handle on here at ActiveFireball, so tweet me, beat me if you want to reach me, or on LinkedIn as well. All of it goes to my email, so talk to me. It's gonna be awesome. Now, with that in mind, let's do some App Lifecycle stuff.
Sounds good. Take it away.
Awesome. So App Lifecycle, in a nutshell, App Lifecycle is one, open source on Windows App SDK. So you can totally go look there, give me comments. I don't know, maybe fix things if you find stuff broken. Two is it's APIs that control the lifecycle of your app. So App Lifecycle is comprised of three main parts. Power state notifications, which is basically a lot of events that your app can listen to. So things like the laptop is plugged in, the laptop isn't plugged in. Here's how much charge is left. Many other events, and these events are exposed to help apps regulate how much power they use. So, for example, an app can go, oh, hey, I got the event that things were plugged in. Let's now do power-intensive work. Or it's plugged in so we can increase how much CPU we use. I don't know. Whatever you want to do. The second part of App Lifecycle is the restart. This allows your app to literally restart whenever it wants to. So your app can go, I was launched incorrectly somehow. I'm going to restart into safe mode. You could also do something where you choose a random number between 1,000 and 10,000 and then make a ticker off that number of milliseconds and then restart your app after that. Wouldn't be a good idea. You'd probably make your users annoyed, but you could do it if you want to. Third, which I consider the meat and potatoes of App Lifecycle, is instancing. Instancing allows an app to programmatically decide if it wants to be single or multi-instance. It can decide how many instances are available. It can decide what instance to redirect to, and this is used in one way to, if you have one instance that's like a UI and another instance that's more of a background task worker or does more of the power kind of synchronous work, you could redirect activations to either one of the 2 or 3 or 4 instances. It's really cool. It's great technology. I was going to say something else, but I totally blanked. But that's App Lifecycle. And then let's do some demos. Please.
Awesome. So I'm going to this one. Can you share your screen? I'll make sure to add it.
Screen has already been shared. Oh, right. I actually have to press the oopsies. There we go. I know what I'm doing. Don't listen to me. I want to share that screen. There we go.
Awesome. Looks great.
Sweet. All right. This is a VM I have, and this is an app to demonstrate the restart and the instancing of App Lifecycle. So to give you a quick tour of the app, up here we have what instance number this is. So it's 0. It's going to be start at 1. This is going to have a maximum of 2 instances because that's just what I told the app to do. This button, click me, I haven't changed it, kind of bad name, but this is going to restart the instance. And this is actually a button, and when you click it, it'll actually update this number with how many activations there have been. Currently it's at 1, and when it's clicked, it stays at 1 because there's only been 1 activation so far. So I am going to launch the app a second time. And there we go. Instance 0, instance 1. This number has been updated to 2. And we can actually press this one. Hey, look, now there's 2. That's app instancing. So if I then try to launch it again, it is going to choose one of the instances to redirect to. You don't actually see anything. But if we click how many activations there have been, it updates to 3. So it does keep track of how many times it's been clicked. And for restart, we can just go to click me, and it's restarted, and the number went up again because it's been activated again. And so that's the restart. That's app instancing. Gabby, do we have enough time to look at some code for this sample?
Definitely.
Awesome. Let's do that. I am going to then, boom, code. Look at that. All right, so just a very disclaimery thingy. This isn't the best code in the world. This is sample code, and I can make it better eventually, but this is not production-ready code, so please don't use this in production. I made it a little bit better, but it's still wonky, but it does the job. All right, so we have a WinUI 3 app using Windows App SDK that has the app lifecycle stuff. So we are in app.xaml.cs in the onLaunched event. If you do want to redirect your instance, it needs to happen in this method as early as possible. Basically, if you detect that a redirection needs to happen as early as possible. The later it goes, the later you do the redirection, the more unpredictable the behavior is. For example, I tried to use redirection in the constructor of the main window, and I got a COM error. I also got an error that said function called at an unexpected time. It wasn't a fun time to figure that out. But so, fair warning, if you're doing redirection, do it as early as possible. So let's quick walkthrough of the code, and we're going to get to the meat and potatoes of redirection. I call get instances to figure out, one, how many instances there are, and to figure out what instance to redirect to if we have to. Here is where I set the title that I showed you before. We then get the activated event args. This is a non-modifiable object, and this is needed because when calling redirection, you need to pass in the activated event args. We're going to keep track if the redirection has, if we have redirected. And then we get the number of activations using get an increment number of redirections. That's up top. This sample will be online eventually. I do plan to, but it's not online right now, so you can totally look at this code if you so wish to. If we have not reached the number of instances allowed, we just pass through and we go, hey, since activation has not been redirected, we just activate the window. Now let's say we're activated a third time, because I have max of 2. It'll go to cancel home. I'll be like, wow, there's 2 instances. There's already 2 instances. So sorry, this would return 3 instances, which is greater than 2. So now we're going to redirect. This is just a simple, what instance am I going to redirect to? You don't have to do it this way. You can do some other fancy, like instance 0 is this, instance 1 is this one, instance 3 is this. Whatever your logic is, I just did a very simple choose one. And then once we get the instance, we want to redirect to, once we get the number of the instance we want to redirect to, we get the index, we call instances, index, redirect activation to async, pass it the args. This is an async call. So if you want, you can do something else. I just called to get a waiter to make it synchronous to make life easier for me. And then, as you saw, this is changed to true. And so we will exit because we don't want the activation to show up because it's redirected. And that's it. One note that I do want to point out, at least to me, this was backwards. You want to call redirect activation to async on the instance you want to redirect to. You do not pass in the instance you want to redirect to redirect activation to async. It took me a little bit to figure that out. And then if you want a C++ example, you can totally go into the Windows App SDK, GitHub, go under specs, app lifecycle, instancing, and you will be able to see some C++ examples. And with that, that is with, oh, right, restart APIs really quickly. Sorry, restart APIs. Aha. Sorry. Restart is very simple. Just literally call restart. You can pass in arguments, but I haven't checked to see if how these arguments are passed into the restart API. Haven't checked that out, but literally anywhere in your code, you can call Microsoft.windows.app.lifecycle.app.instance .restart, and it will restart your app. You can do it wherever you want. I just happen to do it on the click of a button, but you can do it wherever you think restarting works. And now, I'm telling the truth this time, we are done with App Lifecycle and all the demos.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. If anybody has any questions as well for Darren, we'll have him on the call for Q&A. So if you have any questions about App Lifecycle, definitely feel free to pop those in chat and we'll be on. Awesome. Thanks, Darren.
Anytime.
Awesome. So next up, I want to give a little bit of an overview of WinUI 2.8. So it was released last month on July 18th, and it contains WebView 2 for UWP. There's an update to the minimum supported version of WebView 2, which is Windows 10 version 1809, which matches Windows App SDK. There were also several bug fixes, improvements for several controls, including tab view, nav view, info badge, and progress ring. And we also made a lot of improvements to accessibility behavior and high contrast mode. Also point out that we are still actively patching WinUI 2.8 with various bug fixes. And 2.8.1 is already available, released it yesterday or the day before that. And I'll reiterate from last time. Currently, we don't have any plans for WinUI 2.9 for adding new features. We'll be focusing on WinUI 3 and Windows App SDK. But I wanted to give a bit of an overview of WebView 2 for those who may be a little bit less familiar. And now that's available in WinUI 2, you might have access. So let's add Kristen. Hi, Kristen. How are you?
Hey, good. Thanks.
Awesome. So I will let you introduce yourself, and then we can hop in to talk about WebView 2.
Great. Thanks, Gabby. I'm Kristen Shaw. I'm an engineer on the WinUI team, and I'm excited to talk to all of you today about WebView 2. You may have seen WebView 2 in WinUI 3, but since, as Gabby said, we just released it in WinUI 2, we wanted to spotlight it. So I've got a slide. Thanks. So WebView 2, as the name suggests, is a control that lets you embed web content in your native app. Now you can serve a live web page, just point to any website and it will render within your app. You can also use local assets, whether that's just a little snippet of HTML or a whole website that lives locally in your app. This gives you the flexibility to navigate to a live URL and tweak content up until the minute and even after your app goes live. Or if you use local content, you can really lock things down and not expose them to the whole internet while still including them in your app. You really have the best, oh, sorry, still on that one, thanks. You really have the best of both worlds in terms of native capabilities along with web flexibility. And your web content is essentially cross-platform. So if you do target other systems, you don't have to rewrite those pieces for those platforms. WebView 2 gives you bidirectional communication between the native and web sides of your app. You can pass native objects and use them in JavaScript, and then you can communicate from your JavaScript back to the native code. Some simple examples are you could update your app's title bar to reflect navigating to a different website, or you can kick off a JavaScript script on the website from your native code. You can use WebView 2 as a media player if that's functionality that you're missing in WinUI. Maybe you have help tutorials on YouTube and you can display them right in your app. In WinUI 2 specifically, you can use the WebView 2 SDK version of your choice. So if WebView 2 releases a new version, you can pick up that new NuGet package right away and start using it. You don't have to wait for WinUI to update. Next slide. So just a little history. There is a WebView control that uses the legacy Edge browser. At this point, we only recommend it if you need to target certain hardware like Xbox or some hub devices or apps targeting below RS5. But the new WebView 2 is built on the new Chromium-based Edge, and we really encourage everyone to use it going forward. And now I've got a demo for you guys.
Awesome. Let me just add it in. Looks good.
Cool. So I'm going to show an example of projecting your custom objects to the web side and using them in JavaScript. Now, this code is available for you all to see on my GitHub. I'll have a link for that later. I also have a version of it using WinUI 3, so you have access to that. This is just a sample that I created. It's not official, but it should work well. Links to the tutorials that I followed are on the README pages for each project. And so as thrilling as it would be to watch me follow a bunch of tutorials, I've already done that, so I can just quickly walk you through what I've got and show you the finished product. Also, if you look at the commit history on the project, you can kind of see step-by-step how I did it along with the tutorials. So first, there's a tutorial called Getting Started with WebView 2 in WinUI 2. This sets up your main app. I very creatively called it Native Web WinUI 2 app. The tutorial sets you up with basically a mini browser. There's a web view and an address bar. Then I used Edge's tutorial called Call Native Side WinRT Code from Webside Code to create this WinRT adapter project. Behind the scenes, it uses a tool called the WebView 2 WinRT.js projection tool to build a library out of your code that allows the WinRT APIs to be exposed in the WebView 2 control. Now, with those two projects, you can use Windows APIs in JavaScript already. The tutorial sets you up to use Windows.globalization namespace, but we want to take it farther since you probably want to use your own code as well. So for this, I set up a Windows runtime component following the Windows runtime components, the C++ WinRT. I have a class called temperature in there, and I use an adjust temperature method to increase the temperature by 1 degree at a time. Very exciting. So now, after that, I went back to the Edge tutorial and specifically looked at the custom third-party WinRT components section of that. I followed those directions to make a few adjustments in the product and added one more line of code in the main project that, with this add host object to script, lets us expose that namespace to JavaScript. So I'm going to copy this for future use. So I'm going to hit F5 and This should run pretty quickly. Hopefully it doesn't think I changed anything. There we go, deploying. It's really thinking there. Okay, so here's our little mini browser that it made. And I'm going to open the dev tools with Control-Shift-I. Make sure I'm in the console, and I'm going to paste that little JavaScript snippet that I had. You can get this from the tutorial, and then the rest kind of follows from there. So I'm going to increase it by 2 degrees, and ta-da! My imaginary room is now 2 degrees warm. Very, very cold. So yeah, that's my demo.
That's awesome. Thanks, Kristen. It's so cool to see the WinRT objects in the browser. That was my new knowledge for the demo. So thanks for sharing. And then as always, if you have any questions about WebView 2 in general, please leave them in the comments and we can answer them during the Q&A. And I believe we're also joined by somebody from the Edge WebView 2 team. So if you have kind of related questions around WebView 2, not necessarily in WinUI 3 and Windows App SDK, we might be able to answer those as well. So awesome. Thanks, Kristen. Let's get back to slides. Awesome. Great. And here are the resources that Kristen was talking about to check out the samples. So you can check out her sample. And then if you want more info about WebView 2, you could use that AKA in this link. Alrighty, so next I kind of wanted to give a little bit of an overview of WinApp SDK 1.2 Experimental. This was released just a couple of weeks ago. And this is actually our first experimental release since last August or so. So it's been about a year. I wanted to know about experimental releases. These are early stage features, early in development. They're not guaranteed to be in the name or the release that they're part of, and they might never be released. But we wanted to include them so you can get kind of a first look at some of these features. You can provide feedback. You can really help shape the features that we're including in the experimental releases. So this release included a new namespace, Microsoft UI Content, which we have some folks to kind of give an overview of that. It also includes updates to the WinUI 3 control styles behavior to be on par with WinUI 2.8. So that includes info badge, that includes horizontal color picker, that includes all those accessibility goodness that we added to 2.8. That's all going to be in WinUI 3. And there's also additional bug fixes from 1.1 that's brought now to the servicing branch, and there's a lot more. So if you want to check out the full release notes, there's an AKA link there. But also if you search for 1.2 experimental WinApp SDK release notes, you should find the right spot. So now we're going to be joined by Steve and Tibru. So let me add them on. There's Steve. There's Tibru. Hello.
Howdy.
Hello, hello. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
That's
you're good.
Great. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you want to give a bit of an introduction of yourself, and then we can hop right into content?
Yeah. Well, it says it all there. I'm a product manager. I've been with Microsoft for many years. I'm currently working on the WinApp SDK, and I'm here to talk about our new platform component content. And Tiberiu is here with me as well. He can introduce himself.
Hey, hi guys. My name is Tiberiu. I'm an engineer on the WinApp SDK development team, and let's talk about some content.
Awesome. We can hop right in.
Okay, so there's been a lot of interest in the community and internally in the WinUI and WinUI 3 and the Islands technology. We've had a lot of external and internal feedback we've been listening to, and this has kind of led us to create a new platform layer. As we've been examining this feedback and trying to see what we would need to do to respond to it in a meaningful way, we've realized that there's a broad set of functionality that's kind of a level below WinUI 3 and XAML, but has a lot to do with supporting the hosting mechanism required to, for example, take WinUI content and host that for example, a Win32H wind. So we've gone and actually created that platform layer. We're building the WinUI 3 island story on top of that platform so that we can take advantage of all the advantages that brings us. And we're to the stage now where we think this platform layer is useful and interesting in and of itself to certain classes of developers. So the 1.2 experimental release gives you a really early look at this content hosting platform and what it looks like. So we refer to both content and content islands. It's kind of a new term. So we want to just kind of define that. It's basically this underlying platform for XAML islands and Win32 apps, or XAML islands. And by content, we mean any interactive material, and this is kind of where we're abstracting up a level, any interactive material that is created and managed by one UI framework, for example, WinUI 3, but then can be encapsulated so that for presentation interaction purposes, it looks like an element in another framework. For example, a child window or an HWind in the Win32 world. And the goal is to achieve this kind of hosting of content without any user experience seams across the various framework boundaries. So it all looks like part of a single consistent piece of UI. You could almost think of this as the old Win32 child windows on steroids and fully modernized for content that is hardware accelerated, supports animation, and so forth. Why do we think this matters? So, as I said, the genesis really was we wanted to make the XAML island story and carry that forward, and we think this is a critical part to that story. But as we've built it, we've realized we have a more generic connective infrastructure that can accommodate many frameworks, not just XAML and not just Win32H winds. There could be many different kinds of hosted content that could fit into this picture, and there could be many kinds of hosting frameworks as well. So we're just starting to think about some of the possibilities here as we move forward with this. We think this is really interesting to app developers, particularly if they have really complicated code bases and are relying upon many different renderers, sources, UI frameworks. We have a lot of apps like that ourselves. We know many customers have built apps like this over a long period of time. And we believe that the islands approach will allow apps like this to simplify what they need to do in order to maintain or to enhance these kind of complex applications. And people who want to build such applications from scratch, it should be much easier to do that. The islands infrastructure should take care of a lot of things that right now are very hard for developers who are trying to cobble together different pieces of UI technology. And then a third kind of class of interest is there are developers who are building UI frameworks. And their customers are these app developers. And by exposing the Content Island APIs, we can make it possible for those framework developers to actually build the interfaces to make their UI frameworks play well with our island infrastructure so that the application developers don't have to do that work, even that piece of work themselves. So what we have in the 1.2 experimental release is very early going insight into what we're doing with this platform component. There are several experimental APIs, and we have a sample app. The main focus there is on a couple new abstractions. One is this content island abstraction itself. And this is from a programming perspective, this is a class that ties together output and composition and input and accessibility and even input state across different kinds of frameworks. It ties all of this together in a way that allows the developer to construct this visual tree across different kinds of UI frameworks and making it all interactive in a consistent and seamless manner. And we have a particular API, the desktop child site bridge. You might be familiar to those of you who've used WinUI 2 islands in the past. Very similar to the desktop API for connecting XAML content to an HWind. This is an API that allows you to connect a content island to an HWind. And we have a sample app for that. And I'm going to turn it over to Tiberiu because he put that all together and has a great walkthrough of that app and how it works.
That was a great presentation. Yeah, so we have a demo for you today about the content We actually have a sample on GitHub already available. We pre-recorded the demo just in case there will be some glitches. So I think Gabby can try to play it now. And then if you have some questions later, we can have it in the Q&A.
Yeah, definitely. Any additional questions about WinUI 3 or Content Islands, definitely put those in the comments. I see some already coming in. So I'm going to put in a video. And folks, once I start the video, if you have any audio issues that are coming through, definitely let me know in the comments and we can go from there. I am crossing my fingers. Just a minute. Awesome.
Hi there, my name is Tiberiu. I'm an engineer on the Windows App SDK development team, and I'm happy today to be presenting to you a sample which uses the content-related APIs that we introduced in a 1.2 experimental release. The sample I'm about to present today is also available publicly on GitHub at this link. If you go to this link, you will be able to find the sample, and in the root folder of the sample, there is a README file which walks through the basic steps of how to build it and run it, as well as the main conceptual elements that the sample is reasoning about. Here is a chart of these main concepts that the sample is reasoning about. At the top of this chart, we have an app window, which represents a top-level window. On the bottom of the chart, we have the content island, which is the new API that we are adding in the 1.2 experimental release. This content island tries to bring together output, input, layout, and accessibility in order to provide an interactive user experience. In between the app window and the content island, we have a desktop child-side bridge, which tries to provide the interop layer between these two layers. Let's jump into the Visual Studio sample. This sample you can also open up if you open up the solution file from the GitHub repository that I linked earlier. Since this is a Win32 native app, it will have a classical Win main entry point. The first thing that we need to do when we enter the application, we need to initialize our thread for command winrt and create a dispatcher queue. This is needed in order to use any composition or input-related APIs. Next, we'll be creating our top-level app window, give it a title, and show it. We will be creating a compositor. And next, we are creating an object called desktop child site bridge. This is this object that we showed earlier in this scheme that sits between the app window and the content island. You can see that in order to create one of these objects, we need to specify the compositor and the window ID to which this bridge links to. I specified here the hwind of the app window, but we could specify any child hwind here. Next, we make sure that the desktop child side bridge is showing. We set a policy as well, so that the desktop child side bridge will always follow the size of its parent hwind. Next, we create this object called the drawing island, which is actually defined by the sample, and internally it creates a content island. The content island, if you remember, it was this object at the bottom of our chart. So once we create all these objects, we will be connecting the desktop child side bridge with the content island. Once this connection has been established, then we can start running the event loop so that our application can process messages. Let's run this application, see what happens. As you can see, we have our top level window, and if I click on certain points within this window, I will be creating some visuals. So notice that this sample app is not leveraging XAML in order to draw these squares. It's actually using a lower level primitive called a visual in order to represent these squares. Let's dive a little bit deeper into how this is accomplished in this drawing island file. As I mentioned, this drawing island internally is creating a content island. And in order to put any visual content inside the content island, we will have to set its root property to a visual, which we can create through the compositor. In this case, in the root, we will be putting a background visual, which is a sprite visual. By doing this, the visual tree, the structure that we create, will be showing up in this content island. If we want to initialize the input aspects for this content island, we can get, for instance, an input pointer source that will give us pointer pressed or pointer moved events, and we can react accordingly in our code to process these events. We also have events for keyboard in case we want to process any key events, and we also have events for detecting when the activation for our island activation, input activation state for our island has changed. Another important aspect of having an interactive content is to provide accessibility. And this is the function that gives us accessibility functionality so that our content can be discovered by accessibility readers like narrator, for instance. This is in short the sample which is using the content-related APIs. Please take a look at it and let us know if you have any feedback. Thank you so much.
There we go. The slides back. Thanks for, that was a great video. I was really excited to see all the different content APIs that are coming. So I see a lot of questions already coming in the comments. So keep those coming. We'll record those and try to answer those on the call. But next up, I wanted to give a little bit of info about what's coming up in WinUI and Windows App SDK. So I talked a bit about WinUI 2.8 and 1.2 experimental, but I also wanted to cover the recent WinApp SDK servicing releases, the feature list for 1.2, and upcoming releases in general. So I kind of just grabbed as many as I could that could fit on a slide for 1.1.2, 1.1.3, and 1.1.4. All of the issues that you filed across several of our different repos. Thank you so much for filing those. I know there are a lot of other issues kind of associated with some of these. Really appreciate you filing those. And if you've filed an issue that you see on this list, definitely make sure to check out that release and ensure that the issue is fixed. Let's see. So now something that folks have been waiting for is the feature list that we're targeting for WinApp SDK 1.2. So these are features that we're still actively working on. We're planning to have previews that will include these features in upcoming releases, and we'll use those previews to determine whether or not they are stable ready, whether or not we have all of the pieces there. But here I'm just focusing on like some high-level capabilities updates. Alongside these, there are so much more kind of performance updates, stability updates that we're making that just didn't fit it on this slide. So this is just kind of high-level overview for some features that folks have been asking for. So this includes media playback controls in WinUI 3. We're adding media player element and media transport control. We're adding support for dynamic refresh rate, which was introduced in several Office apps that will automatically switch between 60 Hertz and 120 hertz rates. That also saves on battery life. As you saw in 1.2 experimental, we're also brought WinUI 3 up to date with WinUI 2.8, and that will also ship stable in WinApp SDK 1.2. We're looking at the ability to create widgets for Windows 11 devices with Windows App SDK. And then additionally, once .NET 7 is available and once a Visual Studio ARM64 version is available, Windows App SDK 1.2 will be supported for both of those actions. Some additional updates include we're bringing the app window title bar APIs down level to Windows 10 1809. We've received so much feedback on that, and in general, bringing APIs down level to our support threshold. And so thanks for emphasizing that. And we're starting that with the app window APIs. We've also introduced a pretty large size reduction in the package for Windows App SDK 1.2. So we've already measured it with 1.2 experimental compared to 1.1, 11% reduction. So we're excited for that. But we anticipate that will be a different number when we compare the stable 1.1 to the stable 1.2. There's also going to be improvements to Template Studio, RTL support for the WinUI 3 XAML title bar. And then for C# apps that publish with IL trimming, we anticipate a app size reduction. So this is just some at a high level point of the features and capabilities that we're adding for 1.2. But there will be more that we'll be talking about and introducing in preview releases. So to mention a bit about those releases. So as I mentioned, we plan on shipping more preview releases before Windows App SDK 1.2. I believe that Ryan gave a date in the comments about 1.2, noting late October. So that's what we're aiming for, to ship that stably. We also plan on that cadence of going back to including experimental releases. So we plan on shipping one of those after 1.2. Again, more previews before the next 1.3 release, which we're also aiming for kind of Q2 or earlier of 2023. So kind of on a 6-month rhythm. Let's see, Ryan, I'm going to add you to the stream if you want to add any additional comments. Does that sound all right? I see you nodding.
Yeah, I don't think I have any comments, Gabby, but mostly because I've been typing feverishly in the chat rather than listening to what you just said. But yeah, I mean, maybe the one thing to point out is for 1.2, we're targeting October 18th as the date that we'd like to get it out. I don't know whether we'll hit that, but we've actually been when we've been shipping the experimentals and the previews, we've been largely hitting the dates that we've been aiming for, so I feel pretty good about it. And then 1.3, we're looking at end of March. And so that's, ideally when we would ship, because we are trying to settle into a 6-month rhythm. And for those who are smart, they will quickly realize that October to March is actually 5 months. So we did a 5-month release in there, but what we're really trying to settle into is end of March and end of September. That's the ultimate cadence we're trying to get into. So yeah, not a lot more to add there. And we're in the process of planning 1.3 now. So all this conversation that we're having in the chat about could you build this feature? Could you build that feature? Perfect timing, because we are taking stock of that backlog and trying to figure out what are we going to do for 1.3. So
yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to keep you on because I think that's all I've got, and we can head into discussion Q&A. So I'm going to start adding folks on, and then I'll have Savoy take it away. So give me just a second. Hello, Savoy. I think I'm going to add you, but your camera's a little off. Sounds good. We'll keep you on audio.
There we go. What about now?
Looks good.
Okay, well, hi, everyone. We got a lot of questions on GitHub, so maybe let's start with some of those. I see we have Scott, awesome, and Mike. Okay. So there's a question here that I see Scott or Mike, either one of you might be able to take for us. After updating our app from WinApp SDK 1.0.4 to 1.1.2, our users report several crashes, especially with drag and drop and adding several items to list view. After switching back to 1.0.4, users are much happier. Are there any known regressions in the 1.1.x version?
Scott, you want to talk about drag drop?
I'm not aware of any specific regressions from 1.1.4 to 1.2 experimental. Generally speaking, though, as Mike points out here, there are issues. There was an issue with drag drop, which will be fixed in preview 2 of WinApp SDK 1.2. And if you saw the chart that Ryan just put up, that will be out shortly, within the next month, I suppose. So you can look forward to that. And then there's also the app unhandled exception issue, which makes it very difficult to diagnose and troubleshoot these crashes, and that will be fixed. So sort of tiptoeing around the question, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with, to identify and diagnose and troubleshoot these issues. But I'm not aware of anything specifically with regressions that make it worse, that would make you want to revert to 1.1.4. I would just say, generally speaking, any issues that you find like that, please create an issue on the Windows App SDK forum and attach a dump. I know it's a bit tedious to do that, but it's really helpful for us.
There've been I think there's a few questions in the chat about stability in general. Just some general comments on it. We try and do service. We fix bugs and servicing releases. The rhythm we're on is to try and do a servicing release the second Tuesday of every month. And so one of the things we're doing is we're watching the issues coming in on GitHub, and we're trying to make a distinction. Some of the issues that come in on GitHub are problems that we've had, maybe for a while, or missing features or things like that. But we're also paying special attention to see about issues coming in that are new issues to new features that we've just added. So we're watching that, and we are making bug fixes, and we are putting out servicing releases. So we'll keep watching.
Awesome. Thanks, both of you. Scott, while you're here, we have another question from Wim asking, when will it finally be possible to get diagnoses from users reporting silent crashes, such as crashes I currently have no way to handle? I think that's your unhandled exception thing.
It is indeed. Yeah, that's right. And I know how painful that is. The app just disappears. The best experience you might have, the only experience probably, is in the debugger. You just pop all the way up to application start with a stowed exception, which is perfectly useless. Yeah, I think that, Wim, that'll be much easier with preview 2. You'll get a stack, you'll get a message, you'll get source. The system exception will be fully populated in the unhandled exception handler.
Awesome. Okay, a question for Ryan. HEIC to JPEG Dev is asking, when will WinUI get a XAML designer, as Hot Reload doesn't yet support all XAML features, like inline row definitions and hunting for properties without the grouping and exposures of the properties windows mean that we have to keep referring to an alphabetical list in the documentation. There's a related question from Ilithar saying that I'd expand on this and ask, when will the framework be open and documented so that other people like Raphael from the Rust team can write its own XAML designer independent from the Microsoft tool chain?
Great. I'll try and answer both of those. There's sort of two parts to it. The first one is really around a XAML designer. I know that there's been a lot of interest in a XAML designer, and actually some of that interest honestly has caught us a little bit by surprise, because we did some surveys. This was a while ago, maybe a couple years ago, when we were trying to determine if we needed to build a XAML designer, and a lot of the data we got back actually was that people didn't think it was really critical. A lot of people were hand coding and they were happy with that, but I've seen a lot of noise about it. So I think what our team is going to have to do over the next few weeks is ask ourselves, should we revisit that question? Because we had kind of closed it in our mind. We were like, well, we're going to go with Hot Reload, and we think that folks will be okay with that. But because building a designer is it's an ambitious thing to do and also an ambitious thing to maintain. So it's not like media controls where like you can sort of just go and get them done with the dev in, you know, a few weeks of work. It's a pretty substantial thing. So I think we're going to have to gather some more data on how vital having a designer is, and I'll have a better answer after we've had a chance to go and crunch that. In terms of making the platform more open, I'd like to think of us as pretty open except for the source code part already. And in terms of trying to get open source, I saw a few questions on the GitHub issue around, well, what are we going to do about open source, especially since WinUI 2 is entering a sustain period? And so I'll just answer that question, which is, yeah, we saw this coming when we said, okay, we're probably not going to be doing a 2.9. And, you know, so now I would say the pressure is more than ever to go and figure out what we're going to do in the open source realm. And there's a few options at our disposal. I think, like, at least near term, it's not like we're going to be closing down the WinUI repo or anything. You can still file issues and bugs for WinUI 2. We'll still be addressing those. We still have the ability to service and will be servicing. So that's like not going to suddenly disappear overnight. The big question is, what do we want to do moving forward for like feature requests and things like that? And, you know, we could open source just the controls layer as like a smaller step to open sourcing all of the code. I think we're probably overdue for a little bit of a recosting in that place, just to sort of circle back and really ask ourselves, what would it take to go and do that? Because we had costs a while ago when we took a look at this and they were pretty big, but we've also made some progress over time. So it's a bit of a non-answer because I don't know exactly when we would be open source, but that ambition has not disappeared. And it is something that I think we'll start looking at with fresh eyes, just like the XAML designer issue.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I want to make sure I get some questions here for Steve, Jeff, and Tiberiu. We have one from Lothar asking, does Content Island also work in the other direction, such as using my Win32 HWind client controls inside a WinUI 3 app window?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, I noticed that question in the chat, and I want to clarify that the current API we have in the Content Island namespace, it's hosting from the other direction. Like we can host visual-based content in a HWind. We don't support yet hosting a HWind within a visual. So this is some feedback. If the community thinks that this is something that we should support and feel strongly about, please give us that feedback if you want hosting in the other direction effectively. So the answer to the question is no, we don't.
Thank you. And so Yoshi had a similar question. Does the UI framework we want to embed have to support rendering to a specific HWind, or can it create its own HWind and have XAML islands embed in that that existing window?
So currently, the XAML island creates its own HWind because it needs to own it. At a technical level, like it owns the WinProc and it's handling all the messages for that HWind, classic Win32 functionality. As we are looking at improved ways of hosting XAML to be able to build more modern experiences that don't require child HWinds, then eventually that restriction would be removed. But right now, it still requires being hosted inside its own dedicated child HWind.
Awesome, thank you. A question for, let's see. Let me grab one here for, this one's, I suppose, for anyone. We have iBiller asking, when will documentation get updated? There's still a lot of references everywhere to project reunion and version numbers less sub 1.0. The documentation on MSDN pretty much directs to UWP. And so we're getting close to circling back to November for an anniversary, and they're looking to see an update.
I put myself back on. I can help answer that a little bit. Yeah. But we work pretty closely with the docs team when we're creating new releases. And so thanks for kind of putting that question / comment out there. So I'll make sure that we go back to update some of the pages that we may have been missing with regarding to Project Reunion to WinApp SDK. I know that, we still are making servicing updates to Project Reunion 0.8, which is still with that nomenclature. And so there's still maybe some areas where that still makes sense. But it's a great note. And thanks for the feedback. And I see Mike unmuted.
Well, I was just going to say, there's a button on the bottom of the doc pages where you can leave a comment, and that automatically, what that does is automatically open up a issue in GitHub, and so that helps to try to give a pulse on the pages that need the most help.
Definitely, and they come to me.
All right, so another one for our friends here from the Content Islands group. And Ryan, I also see your name on this question, so not sure if you'd prefer to take it, but are there plans to support WinForms / Win32 control islands? While there are well-known issues achieving the function level of WPF, it would be more than sufficient for basic stuff. The foundation is seemingly there with WebView 2.
I'm happy to defer, but I can add anything if anyone wants me to add.
So we recognize that, there's obviously something that's very interesting for a lot of scenarios. There's just sort of a bring up order that's necessary in order to support it. So being able to put arbitrary H1s like from WebView or from WinForms or WPF in with SAML, there's a lot of integration issues that have to be addressed, but those integration issues are dependent on the functionality that we're currently working on. So we have to complete that first, then we can look at how to do those scenarios. What honestly is really helpful is if you guys can send us apps, send screenshots, send examples, so that we're able to talk about specific things and specific integration issues rather than in generalities. The more information that we have about the scenarios that the community is trying to build and how they are measuring if those scenarios are successful or not, the more that it helps us to be able to prioritize work, make sure things work end to end, and to build great solutions that everyone loves.
Awesome, thank you. Question for you, Ryan. Raphael is asking in chat if there's any updates on the triage of issues on the Microsoft -UI-XAML GitHub repo.
I don't know what to say to that question. Maybe I'm not understanding the question.
Oh, sure. I think he's looking to see if there's any updates on our plans to address the backlog currently.
Yeah, I can comment on that. I think it's been a thorn in our side for some time, and so I know that I think right now the comment was the high number of open issues, and so we've been talking of ways of how we can effectively address that, and I think that's been on our minds for quite some time. I think it's what we've said for a few community calls, and I think it's where we're at is still prioritizing what are the most critical issues that need to be addressed, and so we're focusing on making sure that those are seen, addressed. The ones that we're including in our servicing releases, those are popping up. We see those, how those are affecting, and so we still need to make our way through the backlog. So it's a similar answer, but still on our minds.
Thanks, Gabby. I see we're at time here. There were a lot of questions that came in today, several on GitHub. I'll end here, but as always, I'll add the note that if you want to see an answer sooner than next month's call, do feel free to use the GitHub repo. We have a discussion and question issue template, so these can be asked there, as well as we always try to keep our unanswered questions so that we have a backlog for the next call. So thanks for everyone who asked questions today, and thanks for the team who joined us to answer them. I'll turn it back over to Gabby to close out the call.
Awesome. Thanks, Savoy. Thanks for emceeing all that. Yes, another thank you to all of those who have joined, asked so many great questions, helped give us the feedback that we need. And thank you to the presenters who have joined us and for our always hearty Q&A answers as well, the familiar faces. So thanks so much for all for joining and participating. We will see you on the repo and we will see you next month. So let me pull up our background. Thanks all.